give you a chance to resist.
Welcome back. In the first half of this deep dive, Beast in the Field of Desire, I tried to lay the groundwork. What desire means, what insight can viewing Sylus from an animal perspective provide, the importance of play in their dynamic, and then pivot towards two of his cards that are significant when it comes to desire and intimacy, but mainly touched upon Darkbound Souls story, the part that leads up to the Kindle section. In this video, I'll specifically talk about Night of Secrecy and Darkbound Souls, compare the two to assess what changed and what remained over the course of time, and what commanding your desire means in Sylus's context. Now, I know I've said it millions of times already, but I still get comments that clearly haven't watched the video and base their thoughts on the 2-minute clip I shared on TikTok. And believe me, if I could say what I want to say in 2 minutes, I would. Video recording and editing literally makes me want to rip my hair out. So I'd love a quick and easy solution, but that cannot be the case, right? I can only repeat so many times that this is a project that builds upon the previous videos, builds upon itself, and not a standalone deep dive. I've made a playlist, so if this is your first time here and you want this video to make sense, then I kindly urge you to watch the previous ones first. Anyways, without further ado, to quote Alexander the Great, let's get this over with. To give you a brief summary, in Night of Secrecy, MC finds out that Sylus will be going on a difficult and dangerous mission and will be going there alone. No matter how much she insists, Sylus refuses to take her with him, and this is the very simple premise of the card. Nightly Rendezvous event was released after Yes Cat Caretaker and before Touring in Love. Then came Festive Blessing, Tomorrow's Catch 22, followed by Magnum Opus. And considering they officiate the relationship in Magnum Opus in their own unique way, I think it's safe to assume that they are in the flirting phase but not together yet. That's why in Night of Secrecy, the stakes are extremely high. It's their first time being this vulnerable, as they are still not really transparent, honest, and eventually free in each other's presence. The secrecy here, of course, doesn't simply refer to the time they spend between the sheets, right? Sylus chooses to deal with the danger all by himself behind the scenes, and we don't often see Sylus referring to an enemy or opponent as a headache, so the circumstance has to be very dire. Twins are worried about him, at a loss about what to do, hence the first half has this tense undercurrent while the two still enjoy each other's presence and have fun, bantering like they always do.
I used up all of your body wash, by the way.
Bastard.
And there is a crucial moment when the momentum in the story shifts. It's when MC is at the kitchen and Sylus returns from what seems to be a brief outing. His face is half illuminated by the moon, and the part MC caresses is the half that is shrouded in darkness. This is her way of signaling that she's ready to take steps towards embracing Sylus's dark side. They still dance around the heart of the matter, their opposing ethical values their stances dictate. Neither backs down nor forces the other to comply with theirs. Sylus promises that he'll wash his hands before coming home, and the compromise MC is willing to do to go on this, I assume, not very legal mission that will most probably involve killing people. She mentions how high-level wonders are the least worrisome aspect of this restricted area. The kindled part is quite inhibited. Sylus is waiting for her to set the rules and the pace, and only takes MC to bed and positions himself on top of her when she asks him to. Sylus always pays great attention to MC's legs. Her legs are both parts of her that he worships and playfully restrains or holds during intimate times, including her escape routes that are not well thought out. But of course, it's neither because she actually wants to escape nor he wants to ensnare her. As I mentioned in the previous video, it's all in the realm of play. Here, he takes time to caress and kiss her legs once again, while MC plays with the consent she grants to Sylus, retracting it and granting it again, as if to, playfully test him. Then the heartbreaking don't look moment happens. Now, I've seen so many people poking fun at the scene, saying he's asking not to look because of his kissy face, and let's be real, he does look a little funny and cute, but Sylus covering MC's eyes to me told a lot about him. He cannot, to my knowledge, turn off his right eye. Whether he has partial control over it, I'm not sure. That's what I gathered from his Ordinary Traces card, where he mentions the only time he feels comfortable in a crowd is during the New Year's celebrations because people feel content and happy for a very brief period of time. So that tells me he's barraged by this constant influx of information. But let me know if I'm missing a crucial detail with regards to his eye. I think that extends to MC as well, as in he knows what her deepest desires are and can read her like an open book. However, he can't or won't act on to fulfill these desires unless MC voices them out. This bringing desire to the realm of conscious, realm of language is interesting in their context, and I'll come back to it later. I'll leave this now at saying he sees through MC completely. But the vulnerability, seeing and being seen, goes both ways, right? He's afraid that his glaring eyes will give away his burning, insatiable desire for her, but having internalized his monstrosity, he's sure it'll turn her away. At the same time, if she is to fear or feel disgusted by him, as she was in the long-awaited Revelry main story, you won't be able to unsee that fear and disgust in her eyes as well. So he not only covers MC's eyes for her sake, but does so for his sake as well. Or you could even argue that both cases are, eventually, for his own sake. Having access to MC's inner thoughts as a player, we know she desires this, desires him as well, and Sylus being the object of his desire, the topic of control naturally arises. The control Sylus refers to with the line,
No. So you want control?
Of course, has less to do with being the dominant one in bed. Throughout the card, the source of her frustration is Sylus' secrecy and the information he withholds, deciding single-handedly it's for her own good. He anticipates MC going through his phone. That's why she finds nothing when she snoops around or expects she'll pester him for details. That is why he intentionally loses when they make a bet on who'll assemble the gun first, and the loser has to answer one question. He assumes MC will ask about the destination, though I don't think he was planning to tell her even if she did.
Unfortunately, I can't give it to you. Not yet, at least.
But as I've said, he isn't a character who would say yes or easily comply with others just because. MC is uneasy about being left in the dark, and that manifests in her wanting control and restraint over Sylus, as we tend to want to control or police who we don't trust or what's strange or different to us. And he can't be that open with her, more so when she's not ready to be fully open with him either, while they have certainly made progress, as intimacy was their way of being honest with each other in a nonverbal way. This is still not their time for them. Yet. In Darkbound Souls, however, the stakes are much lower now that they have a more trusting relationship, and as a result, the intensity is much higher and they are much more uninhibited. But before we start interpreting the action time, let's start digging around the story that leads up to there. When the two are talking about desires and possible obstacles when trying to fulfill them, Silas says,
Limitations aside, one must first acknowledge their desire to satisfy it. And most are incapable of perceiving the full scope of their desires. Can they even talk about what it means to be satisfied?
sounds straightforward enough that to be able to take action or at least feel motivated towards attaining some sort of satisfaction or fulfillment, you must become consciously aware of what lies in you. Only when you know you desire something can you start taking steps towards fulfilling it. But it's interesting because even when you know what it is you desire or how strongly you desire it, and you are being true to yourself because not everything we desire falls into the realm of legal, kind, good, healthy, or moral. Can you even satisfy your desires? Or to what extent can they be satisfied? In his essay called The Magical Act of a Desperate Person, Adam Phillips, a child psychoanalyst and essayist, writes,
Children don't know about Freud's useful suggestion that desire is by its nature insatiable. Desire is always in excess of the object's capacity to satisfy. Anyone who tries to fully satisfy anyone else, and this is particularly true of adults in relation to children, is playing a game that can only be lost. The promise of total satisfaction is a promise of catastrophic disillusionment, which makes it an incitement to violence. Every child feels punished by being frustrated and is then sometimes punished on top of that for his response to being frustrated. At its best, parental authority contains, rather than creates, this fateful escalation. Punishment, it's worth noting, and the authority that legitimates it, is based on a prior knowledge. You can only frustrate someone if you know what they need, and you can only harm or discipline them if you know what gives them pleasure.
As in, if you know what they need or what pleases them, then you have the authority to withhold their needs or satisfy their pleasures. You can see it in the way Silas and MC frustrate each other playfully by not giving the answer the other needs to hear openly. He concludes the essay he wrote for the LRB with,
By definition, frustration is something we can't just leave as it is. It makes us work. It gets us to work and gives us work to do. But we aren't always sure what kind of work would be useful. And many so-called satisfactions don't appease or even touch the frustration we feel. Frustration is something that, in desperation, we're always tempted to make pleasurable or to punish. It's worth wondering why this is the repertoire, and what our lives would be like if we couldn't turn pain into pleasure.
Because desire is insatiable by nature, we have no choice but to bear the frustration this tension between desire and satisfaction brings, and learn to live with the ambivalence that people who can satisfy us will inevitably frustrate us, and vice versa. So we modify or transform this frustration into something else, like creating art, for example, or like me, yapping about my favorite fictional character like this. So, is consciously knowing what you desire a prerequisite to satisfying it as Silas proposes? That I wouldn't know, but it's certainly not a prerequisite to modifying it. And the project of knowing oneself or knowing exactly what one wants in itself is problematized by psychoanalysts because the moment you claim to know yourself or know what you want precisely, you're closing yourself off to new experiences and others and preempt asking new questions or making new discoveries. I will expand on the concept of excess in Silas's context in a bit, but I think this is also why Silas's boundless greed, overindulgence, and confidence in his ability to satisfy feel uncanny or maybe a bit absurd and is naturally being called into question by MC. There is something that is almost theatrical in his extravagance, that it is so grandiose. On the one hand, he's capable, but on the other hand, the levels it reaches are so absurd and inconceivable. So it lies in this uncanny purgatory of sorts and hard to wrap your head around it fully. Or maybe because I come from a very middle class background. I don't know. I can't understand this kind of excess. It's so foreign to me. During their talk about the nobility house, MC mentally notes Silas's unwavering confidence and continues to think he has the, I quote, look of someone who always claims what he wants and basks in the satisfaction of a fulfilled desire. Silas calls himself a greedy soul, and when MC says, this is a classic case of what Silas wants, Silas gets, he responds with,
how could I possibly refuse a victory that feeds my greed?
Now, there's an excellent section on greed in this talk, but I don't know how YouTube's copyright system works, so I'll read it to you, but if you want, of course, you're free to watch it. Our fundamental relationship with appetite, and that is a fundamental relationship to being dependent, because to have an appetite is to depend on something outside of oneself. The modern psychoanalysis says the child is not in search of gratification, but in search of a relationship. Appetite then becomes the form that sociability takes. You can see it in babies and young children. They have a fantastic appetite for life. Of course, then one wonders, why does it get diminished? Greed seems to me appetite derailed. In greed, there is a despair about satisfaction. So instead of getting what you want, you believe that you need to get as much as you can of what there is. And it's a terrible false solution. This is one version of greed. Greed in the story would be appetite in a way that's been sabotaged or that is born of despair, that you're greedy because somehow you don't believe that what you want or need is actually there. So you fob yourself off by filling yourself up rather than being able to think what it is you want. Now, this is very interesting, right? Especially the part about having an appetite is deeply linked to being dependent on someone, and we know how independent Silas is. So let's let that sink in for a little bit. But then, of course, we have to consider when MC points out that not everyone can get what they want due to being bound by laws, norms, social contracts, or being restricted by their abilities, he steers the conversation towards what we've been talking about, knowing, acknowledging your desires, being the prerequisite to satisfaction. Now, by not being bound by social norms, Silas can acknowledge desire in its every aspect and can freely act on it. So when MC asks him what he would do in order to stop the rumination, by which he means frustration, his answer is simple. Let go of the rules and act on your desire in its purest form. Her desire is to get rid of Grey Mist, and all she has to do is just show up unannounced, press a gun to his head, and eliminate him. What this means is that she has an appetite. And what Silas suggests is to go out and eat. Because if you're hungry, why starve yourself? That's the logic. The issue with this, even before the morality or legality of it, is this almost reflexive inclination in Silas when it comes to satisfying a desire. Now, I'd like to return to an excerpt from another Adam Phillips interview on frustration and pleasure, where he touches upon appetite. Again, I will read it to you, but you can watch the video for yourselves. It's as though we're phobic of frustration. So the moment there is a feeling of frustration, it's going to be filled with something. It's a bit like the mother who overfeeds her child. She does that to stop the child having appetite because the appetite is so frightening. It seems to me there's an attempt to foreclose appetite, and that means foreclose people's capacity to think about what is really missing in their lives and what they might do about getting it. So as you can see, while it might feel overwhelming or unpleasant, by sitting with your frustration or boredom instead of putting a lid on it, you create a chance for new possibilities. It's not even about finding an answer, because finding an answer to what you might be wanting is not guaranteed here. you might never be able to provide an answer, but it's more about ruminating on life, yourself, and others meaningfully. And the second you're trying to preempt or foreclose that, you lose your ability to truly think about yourself and close yourself off to the experiences and the world at large. And Silas's reflexive inclination of foreclosing both his and MC's appetite does look a little excessive, and we can't talk about desire without talking about excess. I've mentioned that Silas's wealth is inconceivable. He has countless safe houses around the lad's world, ranging from a room at a rundown motel to a 100-year-old ancestral house, including the treasury he won on a gambling table, so to speak. And excess of this kind, especially when visually expressed like the scene in Spirited Away, always makes me kind of nauseous and uncomfortable, like literally, even when it's fictitious. So I immediately wondered whether this excess in safe houses is partly a necessity because his life is constantly being threatened, and partly an attempt to foreclose an appetite for home, a place that he can comfortably belong and feel safe. Now, we can think of the base and how he almost never refers to it as home, and despite how safeguarded the base is, which is almost like an impenetrable fortress, yet there are still enemies that can slip in or try to slip in, and he still sleeps with his gun next to him, or only after getting used to MC that he can fully let go and fall asleep when she's beside her. Or the sections in his myths where he and MC are going through this happy and peaceful period without fearing for their lives, which probably isn't happening in real time, but is simply a daydream they envision or wish for together. Now, the same goes for wealth and intel. Both are measures of power and authority, and I assume the reason behind this greed, this accumulation beyond need, is again an attempt to control, to put a lid on the feeling of scarcity that runs deep in Sylus. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that his desire for freedom possibly can only be fulfilled when he's beyond everyone and everything else. And I'm not saying above in a hierarchical manner, but just beyond, because only then he's free from the transactionality, as in everyone wanting to use his power and influence, and hierarchy wanting either to take him down or to serve him. Only then will he be able to live without fearing for his life or being constantly on edge. And now we have to ask, where does MC stand in this picture? In Darkbound Souls, Sylus says there's only one desire he's willing to yield to, pointing to MC's heart. We also see him caressing her chest during this scene. Nice. Which means she's the only one who has the capacity to frustrate Sylus, and also implies that she can be the only one who can satisfy him. I mean, I do think Luke, Kieran, and Mephi frustrate him a bit too, which tells me there's something more beyond the boss-subordinate relationship, but everything else in the world exists relationally to MC. We often see him participating in events, going on vacations, eating subpar food, in short, going out of his way only if MC accompanies him, explicitly stating that it would only matter if she was present or if it was coming from her. Now, of course, we see him attending auctions or highbrow events, etc. So I mean things he wouldn't otherwise do, but only participates in because of MC. There is no running away from that frustration and the ambivalence of the feelings we have towards people who are dear to us. Sylus puts this into words neatly in Ivory Thirst.
Their claws. Oh, I love them. But I also hate them.
You can see it in his right eye and chest being his erogenous zones as well. His right eye is the source of his power, and because of that power, look at the life he's leading, for better or worse. Meanwhile, his chest sensitivity carries the traces of his past dragon self from the time when MC saved him by pulling the sword out of his chest, and as a result, they exchanged a part of their energies, become bound to each other eternally. And it's also the place where MC later stabbed him. Both of these life and death forces bundled into a singular dynamic, and we have quite the erotic experience. Now, this is obviously not a new idea. Freud formulates two types of drives, namely life drive and death drive, or in other words, sexual drive and ego drive, and notes in his essay Beyond the Pleasure Principle that this led us to identify two different kinds of drives: those that seek to guide life towards death, and others, the sexual drives that continually seek and achieve the renewal of life. While Freud, from what I gather, formulated the two in opposition where humans have to contain the ambivalence of both, another favorite essay of mine from an academic, author, and activist Bulan Somai reads Freud's essay in a way that identifies two types of deaths. One that brings life to quiet, that is the opposite of life's complexity and movement, while the other is a necessity to bring new life, directly contributing to the complexity itself. And then there's the life drive. I touched upon this idea of cycle of life and its significance in the anti-life, death, rebirth section in my home video, but if you consider death at the hand of the other as a source or the core of their trauma, their inescapable fate that they are tragically trying to escape, their intimate scenes in both cards open up so many interesting doors. And that's why it's time to talk about the hot spring in the room. I don't know what I was expecting, but whatever those expectations were, Darkbound Souls 100% exceeded them. Just like the wedding banner, Sylus' intimate part in Darkbound Souls was intense in a different way than other love interests. There was something dangerous, even carnal, to their intimacy, but it was, as always, within the realm of play. There was the light spank, the light slap on the cheek, play biting, leaving marks, roughhousing. There was also strangling, which was also incorporated as part of the choreography in improvised flow, and in turn, Sylus leaves her breathless with kisses multiple times. Because some of you are not ready to see him strangle MC, judging by the outrage you flooded social media with after the lightest tap on the cheek. Grow up, please. Another play or enactment that they always engage in is, as I've said, Sylus worshipping her legs, MC running away, Sylus catching her and playfully restricting her legs by pulling her close or throwing her on his shoulder. Like a potato sack. It's adorable. It also makes sense that the scene and positions are eerily similar to the abyssal mark, both because that's when they were bound to each other, but also his dragon form is the most uninhibited primal version of Sylus, and he reverts back to that version. And considering he's technically immortal with the exception of MC, coming close to death or playing with death with her, I assume, is intoxicating for him. As I've said, she's the only one who can rile him up, frustrate him, touch and hurt him in a meaningful way. She is the only one who can grant him true death. I think it's much more pronounced in Darkbound Souls with the atmosphere and the architecture of the hot spring, but intimacy in their context is an act that is almost like a ritual, a reenactment of their doomed fate. The more unrestrained they are, the closer they get to it. And we tend to associate rituals strictly with religion, yet religious rituals are an important but only one part of the whole picture, and the meaning is now expanded to secular ceremonies and even various forms of repetitive and compulsive human behavior by certain scholars. But as is always the case, there isn't a uniformed agreement on this. Following Durkheim, there is widespread agreement that within a religious framework, ritual refers to the practical or rather performative aspect of religion with regard to a sacred sphere. Jane Harrison, who subscribes to Durkheim's approach, notes that in ancient Greek, religious ritual literally means things done. Ritual practices refers to the entire set of performed acts, such as sacrifice of animals, saying of prayers, and relating mythical narratives. A distinction should be made between the performative aspects of a prayer, for example, and the beliefs it conveys. Fundamentally, practices are nonverbal in nature. Now, I'm not claiming that the act of intimacy itself is a ritual in Descartes' context, although sexual rituals do exist, but I recognize that it serves a very important purpose here. It is a way for them to open up to each other, be vulnerable, and in letting go, becoming more honest and eventually free.
Together, we'll feed it and set it free.
In doing so, they come dangerously close to the core of their trauma because the more they try to separate from each other, remember their conversation in the immobilized card, the stronger the linkage gets, but the more they are entangled, the closer they are to their tragic fate of one devouring the other. But if you recognize that intimacy, too, is in the realm of play with a time limit, with the specified space and the consciousness, tension, and resolution, the controlled environment of play provides a space for them to engage with their trauma and come out of it alive with a bond stronger than before. Avgi Saketopoulou has an excellent section in their book, Sexuality Beyond Consent. I unfortunately could only read the book partially, but it's extremely interesting, and I will definitely come back to it once I'm done. Part of what happens when the ego shatters is that these links between the representations and codes that are out there in the mythosymbolic realm and the sexual unconscious momentarily shatters and new connections can be made. What that means is that there's tremendous potential for how the self can expand and get rewritten, not in a way that is true to the original self, not as a deviation from the previous self, but actually as a new becoming. Now, when we say being vulnerable, this is what we mean. Letting our ego take a back seat and encountering another person, acknowledging that the world doesn't revolve around us. And in engaging with the other, we are opening ourselves up to so many possibilities. And some of these possibilities are naturally not pleasant, but nevertheless necessary for us to go through. I'd like to finish this section with another quote from On Not Knowing by Emily Ogden. While the context itself in the book doesn't fit here seamlessly, still this passage provides something interesting to ponder on. As Charles Baudelaire wrote of another of Poe's predators, a convalescent who follows a stranger through the city streets, having lately returned from the valley of the shadow of death, he is rapturously breathing in all the others and essences of life. As he has been on the brink of total oblivion, he remembers and fervently desires to remember everything. He is not chasing prey, he is chasing predation itself and its nearness to the bleeding edge where you can sharpen yourself enough to see clearly. It must be that erotic risk feels to us like the risk of death, as if the withdrawal of the other's regard, even this new other to whom we have yielded nothing as yet, would leave us as completely shipwrecked as death could do. If I chase you, I have gambled on your regard. In what seemed the last breath I have before the dice fall, I live a whole life, all the life I have left, until you look at me with desire. And this brings us to the desire and being in command, When Sylus asks her why she chose not to shoot Grey Mist in that super sultry voice of his, and she stammers, he finishes her sentence.
I'm curious. Why didn't you kill him? You didn't want to be controlled by desire, am I right?
It comes up again during the Kindled.
Everything you hunger for and wish to consume, I'll give them to you.
Then he taps her cheek, and as a response, she gently caresses the hand he used, and then, to my surprise, instead of intertwining their fingers, she curls her hand into his palm, asking, "Is this what it means to command desire?" And he responds with,
Of course not. It's this.
and then shenanigans ensue.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I have to say, I'm a very slow reader and thinker. I tend to spend quite some time to ruminate on ideas instead of immediately trying to force them out of me in crystallized form. As I've mentioned, part of these thoughts are from December last year. I've been repeatedly revisiting them since then, and because this card and event are rather new, I still don't feel like I fully digested it. Now, of course, my ideas might change in the future, but for now, my reading of his line, "Desire is mine to command," is that he's fully facing his desires, acknowledging them, owning up to them, no matter how ugly, immoral, or unacceptable they are, while not being enslaved by them. But what does it mean to not be a slave to your desire? Now we can return to Where Drake Shadows Fall, where he says,
Dragons have an inherent tendency to toy with human desire. But in the end, they inevitably become enslaved by it and turn into true monsters.
Sylus is part human. He's capable of speaking human language, walks on his hind legs, he has thumbs, meaning he can hold tools and such. He's logical and conscious of the human world, part of its inner workings, their emotions, etc. But he's also a dragon, right? He has wings, shares the same instincts with them. His instincts are in conflict with the ways humans live. He is aware that he's inclined to hurt humans, but he cannot excise these instincts either, and is divided between these two selves that is hard to reconcile. So, to him, his monster side is the part that is devoid of logic, compassion, and relies only on instinct with no regard to other living beings, and it is bound to hurt MC as well. I'm reluctant to call this animalistic because there are so many research pieces that highlight that our understanding of the animal hierarchy is actually much more cooperative rather than competitive, and our point of view is heavily influenced by capitalism. So just keep in mind that this is how it is framed in the game. Unnecessary tangent over. Oh God.
A few moments later.
Because that monster is a creature of desire and wants, yet it is still a part of him that he can't excise or suppress. He has to acknowledge these desires and satisfy them, indulge himself to his heart's content. But there's a catch. In order not to lose his sanity and completely give into the monster and ending up hurting his lover, he needs to be powerful enough both to indulge himself and to stop the play the moment he feels his logical human mind is slipping away. You can hear it in the way he kisses MC. Despite the way he so heavily breathes and growls, his kisses always end up sounding soft, short, and restrained, and maybe his wanting MC to be equally powerful is also related to their intimacy in this context. Or when you interact with Sylus on the main screen, and if I remember correctly, you hear this line when you touch his lips. One of his lines is, "Addictive things are dangerous, but if you are strong enough, you can enjoy that kind of danger." Or in Ivory Thirst, he asks for
One last bite. Well, I still have a sliver of reason left.
and the feeding ends afterwards. But now, with the way he is in the current timeline, I'd wager he feels he's tamed or subjugated that part and is in full control, so no one or nothing can sway him. He can immediately attain what he desires because he's capable of doing so, but these being so easy to attain and people so easy to manipulate into getting them to where he wants them, the desire leaves its place immediately to boredom. Then it becomes a tedious cycle that brings no joy or color to his life, with one exception: MC. His desire for MC is hard to deal with, or in his words, nearly impossible to restrain, but it is within the realm of doable. His choosing to yield to it is letting his desire for MC to frustrate him instead of forcefully foreclosing it as he's used to do so. Though, is this a conscious choice? Can this be a conscious choice? I'm still puzzled by this, so I'll definitely keep ruminating on it and come back to it in the future. There are still words left unspoken between the two, like the part where Sylus wants confirmation from MC that just like she's what he desires, the same goes for her as well. The way she expresses that through words is, "I'll crave more from you," which plays into Silas's desperate want for her to need him, but there is still some distance put between this reply and the fully honest, "you're what I desire as well" version. But then again, he's playfully evasive when not giving a fully honest answer to what this desire Sylus would yield to might be as well.
Bastard.
It's again the case of he knows that she knows that he knows. Neither of them lay themselves fully bare, fully in their context, meaning the verbal, linguistic realm. I'm sure you can guess why that is important. A lot of things with regards to Sylus and MC has something to do with oral and oral sensation, right? Their verbal banter is extremely important for them for reasons I explained. In Where Drake Shadows Fall, it's the first bite mark. In Where Silver Wings Rest, it's drinking blood. He has the habit of touching his lips and loves playing with MC's lips as well. We see in Grasp Dominion and Rosy Hues that they relish in the idea of the other verbally begging.
Beg for it, kitten. A sincere request will let you get a taste. Who are these other people you speak of? You're the only one I want to hear it from.
A last minute note here because how the capital F could I forget about this? In Primordial Chaos card, remember he put the ring back on MC's finger with his literal mouth? I was hospitalized for a week. I was not okay. Anyways, back to the topic. Metaphorically, consuming the other is a way to become one with the other, and coaxing verbal confirmation out of MC when Sylus can very well read her desires is, to me, a step towards legitimizing his satisfying MC and forcing her to fully face and acknowledge her own desires. Knowing what you desire, bringing it to conscious realm, is being able to articulate it with words. Hunger and appetite, refined tastes, high oral sensitivity. Mouth is, as theorized by Freud, is our first erogenous zone, and all these details regarding Sylus and MC revolve around the mouth, again, literally and figuratively, including the foreshadowed tragic ending where one snake devours the other. Here's a quote from The Agony of Eros from Byung-Chul Han that I find meaningful in this context. The boar whose tusks killed Adonis embodies eroticism, which finds expression as madness and excess. After Adonis's death, the boar is said to have protested that it had not meant to injure the beautiful youth with its eroticized teeth, only to caress him. In his commentary on Plato's Symposium, Marsilio Ficino describes the eroticized eye of lovers. Like the boar's tusks, such a gaze is commanded by a deadly passion. For those eyes of yours, gliding through my eyes to the depths of my heart, steer the hottest fire in my marrow. Therefore have mercy on me, who die because of you. So, as you can see, Sylus and MC's intimacy in Lingering Lust is intense in a way that is less about celebration as it is in other love interests. It's much more dangerous, deadly, and fierce, but at the same time, so enlivening, affirmative, and freeing. I got literal chills at the part where the last image that conjured up an MC mind when she's, at the peak of her pleasure is the world's most beautiful beast racing across the fields where desire blooms. What do you think? Is this beast Sylus or MC? Or will they be merging into one giant beast as she entertains the idea in a metaphorical way in Lingering Lust event? Who will end up devouring the other and who will be left behind, racing across the field of desire, forever free yet left frustrated, bound to search for the other as its subject of love, only to repeat the very same cycle again and again? The reason why we feel frustrated when we are in love and what separates love from narcissism is the existence of the other. Only when there is distinct other, we can start talking about eros, or as Han puts it, erotic experience presumes the asymmetry and exteriority of the other, and adds that a singular process of weakening lays hold of the subject of love, which, however, is accompanied by a feeling of strength. This feeling is not the achievement of the one, but the gift of the other. I can go on to talk about it for hours, but I'll choose to let you sit with what Han might be meaning with this and quote one last paragraph from the essay I mentioned from Bülent Somay. I hope my translation will do it justice. The commonality in all this is opening up not only the flesh, but the ego to the outer object, real or imaginary, and provide a union, even if it's temporary. Instead of turning the libidinal energy the ego is founded on itself, directing it to the outer objects and choosing to open itself up means both the affirmation and the denial of flesh. In other words, the body-soul integrity which makes a person a person. How else can you define love anyway? But then, what does it mean for Sylus and MC to be the same? If we need the other, the asymmetry and exteriority to be in love, how do you reconcile the recurring emphasis on their sameness and their being in love? That, my friends, is a topic for another day. Thank you all so much for listening. A lot of the things I said about Sylus may seem conflicting, and that's how it should be. Sylus's position in the grand narrative is to problematize, meaning to call into question, what is believed to be true or common sense. Wonders bad, hunters good. Emotions bad, logic good. Institutions that we grow up to believe to be built to protect us, or rules that we are told are imposed for our own good. All it takes is some scratching the surface to reveal how complicated the web of relations between these institutions or who benefits from our abiding by these rules. This is why I was so not surprised by that voice call where Sylus was visiting the Hunters Association and called MC to first rage bait and then ask her out on a date in a roundabout way. I don't want to get banned or something for getting too political on the main. So I'll just say that there are two possibilities here. He's either associated with the Hunters Association as the head of an organized crime group, or he's doing business and or exchange with them under an alias if we assume that the higher-ups don't know what Sylus looks like. Though Tara seems to recall his face when they meet at the resort in Melodious Weave, which can only imply that it wasn't just a single visit, that he visited the association at least several times for Tara to remember him, and neither of these possibilities are surprising to me. His existence as a character problematizes simplistic labels such as good and evil, the common sense of being a law-abiding citizen, what we understand from justice, equality, and morality. He isn't rejecting or favoring one over the other, but he simply accepts that life is just never fully black and white, with his inclination leaning towards the black as he mostly experienced the misfortunes of it. What we deem as good or useful in a success or different forms can hurt our loved ones or us. What we deem harmful, such as violence or crime, is problematized by many philosophers or political theorists, such as Fanon, for example, by asking the questions: who is on the receiving end of violence? In what way is it instrumentalized, and who benefits from it? Whose perspective are we viewing these circumstances from, and what kind of effect does our identity and background, be it political, social, or economic, have on our answers or assumptions? Who's telling the story, and whose story being told? For example, hunters have been killing wanderers, and this killing was justified under the assumption that they are monsters and that they are a threat to humans, which still needs to be problematized because we have to ask why these wanderers look like deformed animals, and why is violence against these deformed animals is more justified compared to humans. Now that we are slowly discovering there are experiments done on humans who then turn into wanderers, how are we going to reconcile with the idea of inflicting violence on others? Or with the idea that these researchers have been experimenting on humans all along? If we step out of the context of the game, what does experimenting on humans and animals alike mean within the realm of medicine? Now, as you can see, the more you ask, the messier and more complicated it gets. And to quote the bossman himself, there is no such thing as a perfect or easy answer. The only thing we can do is to simply accept the ambivalence, continue to question our assumptions that we take for granted, and accept him as a character in his complexity. It makes perfect sense that desire is at his character's core. Desires range from harmless to unhinged. Some are on the conscious level while others are buried deep. It's both frustrating and invigorating, and it is by no means detached from the intricate web of material relations. But it is also at the core of our drive to live. Desire is impossible to pin down, but beautiful nevertheless. Or maybe beautiful despite it all, just like the beast roaming free on an open, seemingly endless field. I'd like to extend thanks again to these accounts for their recordings, also to my Twitter friend Void for offering to look at the script and give feedback on the structure, despite what life has been throwing at their way. I said the project was going to be 4 parts, but I think I'll be able to wrap it up in 3. Will I manage? Or all Nara does is lie? We shall see. But for my sanity, it would be nice to wrap it up with the next video essay. I can't keep on doing this. As always, you can reach out to me on my Stro page or TikTok or leave comments. Credit me if any of my ideas are useful, or I'll turn into a wanderer and fling you into an existential crisis over whether it is ethical to stab me in the ass or not. And see you next time.